Welcome to the EarthWorks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. This is Kevin Hicks with another EarthWorks podcast. I finally got Dr. Mike Richardson pinned down on a time. We've been talking about this for a little while, and I'm kind of excited to get him on. We go back quite a ways and have had some laughs and done some cool trips through the Northwest when he's come out and spoken to our groups. And so I'm glad to have you, Mike. And we're just going to kind of riff on whatever the heck comes up. But I've got a little bit of a list of questions for you. But thanks for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure, Kevin. You know how much I love all the folks out in the Pacific Northwest, and you're in that top group. So it's good to always chat with you, either here today or at meetings and the golf show and the Pacific Northwest Hospitality Room and all those places that we bump into each other every year. So I'm really happy that you asked me to be on today.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, let's get started. So I usually kind of just do an icebreaker, and I don't know a lot of I know you're at University of Arkansas. You're a professor there, but I don't know your background. Like how did you get into this world, and where were you educated? I mean, did you just kind of stumble into it? Were you working on a golf course or something like that? Tell us your background.
Well, we've only got an hour, Kevin. It may take a minute, so just you're going to have to bear with me. So I'll start by telling you what I tell my students in Intro to Turf Management every year. I'm a professor here in the horticulture department at the University of Arkansas, and I specialize in turfgrass management, turfgrass science. But the first thing I tell them when we get into class is like, the first thing you need to know about your professor is he's never had a class in horticulture and he's never had a class in turfgrass management, which always kind of gets a kind of a stunned look on the face of the students, because it's like, wait a minute, you're the turfgrass professor in the horticulture department. How could that be? So that gives you a little intro into my background. I grew up on a cattle farm in North Louisiana, and really a multifaceted farm. Cattle was our primary income, but we did all kinds of other gardening and animal rearing and things like that, and was very involved with FFA and showing cattle and things like that as a kid. And so I went to college at Louisiana Tech to get an animal science degree with the intention of eventually going to vet school. And I got finished with my undergraduate degree, and I thought, I'm going to take a year off and just work a little bit and see if I, can get recharged before going into vet school. And I went to work at a research station in North Louisiana that was doing beef cattle research, but they were mainly interested in the forages and the hay and everything that they were feeding the cattle. So I kind of started working with a faculty member there and kind of got interested in some of the work he was doing on coastal Bermuda grass and some other things, and thought it was kind of cool and fun. And so they offered to send me to LSU to get a master's degree studying forages. And so that's what I did. And spent two years and some change at LSU and got a degree in agronomy and forage production, forage physiology. And again, was enjoying what I was doing. So I went on to the University of Georgia and got a PhD studying the same thing, again, studying forages. But my master's degree was on Bermuda grass, and my PhD was on tall fescue. So I was working on the same grasses that we worked with in turf.
Sure.
And when I finished my degree, the job market was really, really soft in the area of forages. And so at that time, I had a new wife and a couple of babies, and I needed to figure out a way to put food on the table. So I started looking for jobs, and I was casting a pretty wide net, and eventually kind of discovered the turfgrass seed industry and sent some resumes and cover letters out to several companies out in Oregon and Washington, and eventually got hired by a grass seed company down in Albany, Turf Merchants. And so moved across the country to Oregon, and worked mainly doing grass breeding, working almost exclusively on turf grasses. Really started learning about turf in the industry, and then um, eventually a position to open at Rutgers University that was kind of in my wheelhouse, to do turfgrass research. And so I decided to pursue that and got the job. And I moved back across the country and went to New Jersey and worked at Rutgers for a couple of years. And then eventually landed at the position I'm in here at the University of Arkansas. So I really didn't start learning about turf grasses until after I got out of graduate school. I had grown up around golf and baseball. My dad was a baseball coach, so I spent a lot of days building pitchers' mounds and cutting grass and doing things like that. So it wasn't it wasn't foreign to me, but it
Right.
definitely took me a few years to get up to speed. But it was the best move I ever made. I just absolutely loved working in the turf industry, and it's really because of the incredible people uh, um, that are in this industry. And I always tell people, it's like, yeah, golf course superintendents, they're just in such a much better mood than cattle farmers. Cattle farmers are complaining about everything all the time. So it's been nice to work with a group of people that really enjoy going and doing their job every day.
Yeah, there's a passion about this industry that's pretty hard to find elsewhere for sure. I know I've introduced you at several meetings, and I don't think I ever knew that Rutgers piece. That's kind of interesting. Did you have an inkling at one point? I mean, you went into the private sector. Did you have an inkling that you'd be in a teaching research position at some point?
Well, I think I always thought I was going to be an academic. I mean, when I was a
Okay.
graduate student and kind of going through and doing all that, I really liked the academic world and what we did. Um, and but I loved working in the industry too. I loved working for TMI and really enjoyed it. But it was kind of a new venture for TMI at that time to start doing their own breeding and research. And to no fault of their own, they just didn't really recognize how much it was going to really cost to be
Sure.
competitive in that space. And so I could see that, if I had stayed with TMI, I would have probably been moved more into, seed production, sales, something like that, which again, I probably could have done okay at. But when I saw this opportunity at Rutgers, I thought, if I want to get back in the academic world, I
Right.
probably need to do it now and not, wait 5 or 6 years, and might be harder to go back.
So if not to get off on a tangent already, because I will later for sure, but so if a company like TMI isn't doing their own breeding, are they pretty much just brokering others' varieties? Is that kind of how I know the market's consolidated a lot over the last 20 or 25 years, right?
Well, it's pretty diverse across the seed industry. And when I was out there, and that was in the mid 90s, there were a lot of companies that had their own breeding programs and were
Mhm.
doing their own development of grasses. And TMI was actually contracting with a breeder that they had been getting grasses from, but they were also getting grasses from other breeders and then from places like Rutgers.
Right.
And so companies just kind of depending on how they want to approach it. Like I said, it's a big investment and it's a long-term investment to do your own breeding.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it may just be cheaper to go out and buy varieties from other
Yeah.
companies, other breeding companies, or universities like Rutgers or University of Georgia or Texas A&M or whoever, and go about it that way. And then there's a cost associated with that too. You have to pay royalties and licensing fees and those
Yep.
things. But
Yep.
you just have to kind of balance that to say, okay, how do we want to do this from a business standpoint? And so it's quite varied.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. So we're going to shift back to your work at Arkansas, and uh, you can correct me if I'm mistaken here, but I think your position is one of a dwindling number of balance between teaching and research. Is that correct?
Um, well, there's definitely been there's been
Or
a lot of
there's a conflict there. There's a battle, right?
yeah. I mean, there's definitely I mean, there's still a wide variety of positions out there in academia, teaching, research, or extension positions. And I think it really, kind of comes down to what the university um, and the faculty, what they believe their strengths are.
Sure.
And so at Arkansas, we've had a couple of positions here for 25 years now. Myself and then Doug Karcher was here for a long time, and then
Hmm.
we got Wendell Hutchins. We're primarily research teaching positions. Dr. Hutchins has an extension appointment, so he's expanding that effort here in Arkansas, which was needed.
Yeah.
But we've always kind of just viewed our program as being really a kind of a research first program, but we also have had a good solid teaching program as well. And so we have to balance that, in terms of our time and our effort. But it's a nice mix. I mean, it's fun to teach. It's fun to interact with students and do that. But it's also fun to kind of be doing hopefully really meaningful research and stuff that people can use, and then getting the opportunity to come out and then teach, really doing more extension work, coming out and teaching at superintendent chapters or
Sure.
conferences or whatever the case may be. So it's we kind of get a little bit of the best of all worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got it in a bullet a little bit later on, but we might as well get to that now. I think, through the years, and I might be biased because we're friends, but it seems like your research is so much more applicable to daily life of turf managers, and it's been really valuable. I think the one that will always stick out to me is your shade research, and even though it was mostly on warm season grass, I mean, it really, as they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and some of the photos that you had accompanying that research culmination was it's irrefutable. And when you've got an ownership or a membership that doesn't believe that that tree is going to cause you problems, and you show them one of Dr. Richardson's photos of 40% shade versus 0%, it was pretty powerful for me, and definitely helped me out. So and through the years there've been a ton of things that you guys have done that are just and I don't know where you get your input. I would assume it's through associations and supporters and things like that, but um, definitely very applicable stuff.
Well, first off, I appreciate that, Kevin. That those are the kind of comments that probably I cherish the most. As in my position at my work, and when people say that, I always feel like, well, we've done something right.
Right.
And I guess going back to the original comments about my background, I growing up on a farm, and watching day to day life on a farm, there are real problems, and you got to come up with real solutions. It can't just be
Real fast.
some theoretical, mumbo
Yeah.
jumbo all the
Yeah.
time. I mean, there's a place for that too. I'm not saying that that's bad, but for me personally, I've just always cherished the idea of um, let's figure out what the problem is, and let's try to provide a solution, not
Right.
just a theory about how to solve the problem, but a real solution. And so, a lot of the work I've done over the years, some people might view it as just being, well, those were just little easy field trials. And it's like, well, yeah, there in some cases they were easy, but they were field trials that needed to be done
Yeah.
to answer a question.
Sure.
And so that's always been my approach to research. It's still my approach to research today. I mean, I haven't changed one bit. I mean, I've done some basic work over my career, and I'm proud of that too, but much more proud of the stuff that I see people using out in the industry, to do their jobs better or to help them, overcome some kind of struggle. And so that's been a pleasure. And then just a final comment, and I say this all the time. It's like, sometimes people ask me, it's like, well, why do you still, travel out to, Idaho to go speak to a chapter meeting of 50 people or whatever? And, that seems like a lot of time and effort, but over my career, most of my best research ideas have come from those types of meetings where we're talking about something
Right.
and somebody like yourself asked me a question that I'm going, well, that's a really good question, but I don't have an answer. But then you can go back and think about that, maybe develop a new study, another study, and try to answer that question. And sometimes those answers to those questions are, again, they're meaningful because they came from
The practitioner.
an end user that
Yeah.
that had a problem.
Yeah. So I think it's pretty easy for us to track the dollars when it comes to university testing related to new products in the market or products in general and new uses maybe. Where do you find funding for some of those more esoteric sort of projects where is that, I don't know if that's the right word, but it's got to be a little bit tougher to drum up funding for something like that than it is to go to a large chemical manufacturer and say, hey, we want to test your products against these others.
Yeah, that's a good question, Kevin. And it- it's a good question and an important question because the reality is that at a university we get access to facilities, we get access to graduate students, but we have to come up with funding to
Sure.
pay for that stuff. And so regardless of where it comes from, nothing gets done if we can't generate the support to do it. But kind of in relation to my answer to the previous question is that when I have a question that comes from a superintendent, that's an issue with them. They've got a real problem. They're trying to solve the problem. We kind of have an idea about how we might be able to solve that problem. It's pretty easy for me to write a grant proposal to the Golf Course Superintendents Association or some local chapters or the USGA, and that's how I basically build the case for that project. Is
Right.
that this is a real problem. This is a problem that superintendents say they have. This is a potential solution, and oftentimes that's a pretty compelling argument
Yeah.
because they look at that and go, well, okay, this is really a problem out there with superintendents. They've got a potential to answer that question, and that's how we can build that. So we get funding from a wide range of sources, and some of them are the associations, USGA, like that, and then we do a lot of work with private companies, and we just try to continue to build our resource base so that we can, in some cases, we may pursue things that we don't have any funding for, but we've got enough money from some of these other things that we can
Sure.
cobble together enough to do
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I figured that was going to be the answer, so I gave you a little chance to plug your program and and solicit some funding, I guess. So
We're
let's,
open for business.
yeah, exactly. I hung my shingle 25 years ago. We're still ready. So let's get back to, it's certainly the talk of the industry right now. There's fewer and fewer programs like yours that are putting out good quality graduates, to feed the pipeline of assistants and superintendents. Want to start with how many undergrad students do you have in the program right now? And is that number
Uh,
stable? Is it going up or is it going down?
we currently have about 16 or 17 students in the program, which is about a dozen more than we had 3 years ago.
Okay.
So the numbers are definitely increasing. Um, the late teens was a real lull for a lot of programs. A lot of
Right.
programs got down to just bare bone numbers, and we weren't any different. And but we've had to invest a lot more time into recruiting and programs and events that can introduce students to turfgrass management when they're, hopefully in high school and they're still looking for a potential career. And it seems to be paying off. I think our numbers are going to continue to go up. At our peak, probably, 15 years ago, we were almost 40 students. And that's a good number for us. I
Okay.
mean, Arkansas is a relatively small state, so I don't know that we need 100 students, but if we could get a pool of 30 to 40 students where we could be turning out 6, 8, 10 students a year, then I think we'll be doing our part to try to fill some of those positions.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a different world now where kids aren't necessarily looking to stay in Arkansas. There's such a disparity between graduates coming out of school and the opportunities that are available. I mean, they can really, it's like when I got out of school in 1990, whatever it was, 91, I just had to pick where I wanted to go. There were so many opportunities and there were a lot more programs then, but that was the nature of the business. We were growing by leaps and bounds and construction was going crazy. But I see that same pattern again right now where just pick where you want to be and you can plug in almost anywhere in the country, it seems. Well, that's good to hear that. So what's been your best, I know the GCSA has focused quite a bit on FFA. You mentioned that earlier. Has that been a pretty good pipeline? And have there been others that, maybe superintendents could get connected with to try to help in that regard?
Well, I'll get on my soapbox for just a minute.
Please.
One of the things that I think happened that led to some of the downturn in numbers is that, in the early teens, the golf business was suffering. I mean,
Yeah.
courses were closing at an alarming rate. There weren't opportunities for people to move up. You had really good people that had been assistants for 8, 10 years, couldn't get a superintendent's job. And I think what happened during that period, and again, I don't know if I have any hard data on this, it's just a hunch, is that, the golf course maintenance industry kind of got grumpy about their jobs and their careers and their
Mm,
opportunities. And so I don't think they encouraged young people as much as maybe they would have 10 years prior to that,
yeah.
or even today. And I think that's kind of what's happening now as I see more enthusiasm from the golf course maintenance industry and encouraging people, and that's encouraging young people, encouraging women or minorities or any of those things, just in every chance they can to encourage someone get in the business. It
Yeah.
leads to students coming to this university.
Sure.
So we're seeing more students now coming in that were like the students when I first came to Arkansas that had worked a summer on a golf course and really liked it. And then the superintendent encouraged them. Well, you can get a degree in this, and you could do what I do one day. And so that's helped. I think programs like the First Green and FFA are starting to yield some results, and I think they'll continue to yield some results. And probably, I'm hopeful that it's going to yield a lot more results moving forward. So I don't think it's one thing that you can just pin down, but I
Right.
think it's us doing our best to try to engage with high school students, junior high students, even elementary school students through some of these programs like FFA and First Screen. But it's also on the superintendents to, identify young people,
Yep.
open their doors in the summer for young people to come work and then encourage them. And if you do that, then you'll probably see more kids going to universities and getting degrees and, providing a better pool of employees.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. It hasn't been one thing, but there's been a, maybe a comedy of errors or maybe just a lack of attention to the ebb and the flow. I mean, obviously after post 2008, there were a lot of superintendents that got pretty hunkered down, and didn't want to
Mhm.
move because they didn't know whether there was going to be another opportunity coming up. And that seemed to last a number of years where there was typically I think a lot more mobility within the industry. So yeah, I see a lot of that same thing. In fact, next week I was asked to help out with the first green event in Idaho. Actually, it's the second. But in the northern part of the state, we're hosting one here locally, and I'm pretty excited about that. And Jeff Gullickson, who's one of the originators of the program, is going to be basically emceeing the thing. So it'll be should be a good event.
Good.
I'm excited. Yeah,
good for you. We
it's
need more superintendents hosting those events.
yeah.
And
I've done
you got to build some momentum and excitement.
I've done one before with Jeff at his golf course, and I'll tell you that the value of that for me was as much in the teachers and the chaperones reaction as it was to the kids, because there's a preconception of our industry being this chemical waste dump and terrible for the environment, and I don't think there was a single parent or teacher that left that program without a completely different lens of the golf business. And that to me is as valuable in our communities as maybe building a pipeline of future superintendents. That was that was my takeaway, and it was very rewarding.
Well, we kind of see the same thing with this FFA thing. We've done an FFA contest here in Arkansas now for 3 years, and the first year we had a pretty good group of students, and there were a couple of teachers that were kind of interested. But we've seen over the 3 years is that, probably the most important thing, I mean, we've gotten some students out of that already, a few, but we've got more that I think are coming here in the next couple of years. But what really was the key was getting the teachers excited about it.
Yeah.
And once we got those ag teachers excited about it, then suddenly they're teaching turf components in their curriculum. They're excited about it. They're, connecting with local golf courses or athletic fields and going out and taking their students on field trips and things like that. And so, yeah, if you can get the adults excited, then they can help get the kids excited.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. So we've talked in the past, and this could be the wrap up of the conversation. But we talked at GIS this year about kind of, I guess, legacy and professional accomplishments. Maybe not so much personal, but I think I mentioned to you how my proudest accomplishment is just the number of assistants and superintendents that have spent time with me and gone on to be probably in a lot of cases more successful than I ever was. But what kind of things really stick out to you? I mean, you've got an opportunity to really impact people at an early stage in their career, and what motivates you in that regard? As far as I hate to say creating a legacy. Neither one of us are old enough to create a legacy or to be thinking about that, but it's a real thing. And I think you get a body of work after 20, 30 years of being in any career, that there's things that you're proud of. What kind of things stick out in your mind with regard to that?
Well, it's a great question. And I guess, my first comment would be that, anybody that is working in the academic world and interacting with students, whether they're undergraduate students or graduate students, if they don't really have some kind of passion to see those people succeed, then they're probably in the wrong business.
Agreed.
And so that's, to me, that's always been a part of being an academic, is that you're going to have a chance to put your fingerprints on a lot of young people, and you better be serious about that to be successful at it. And so, yeah, for me, Kevin, we talked about research and those kinds of accomplishments, and I've been very successful in that realm, and I'm proud of that work. But it really pales in comparison to the pride I have in the students that I have taught as undergraduates. Probably for me more so because of my research leading the graduate students that I've been able to train. to me, seeing them go and become, rock stars in whatever it is they eventually choose to do is, there's just nothing that really makes me happier. And, when those students, send me a random text and tell me about a new promotion or tell me about some big,
Right.
accomplishment that they've done, it's just, again, it just means it means a lot, and those are the things that are gonna last. And legacy is a great word because it really is. It's trying to extend your impact for years into the future.
Right.
And the publication, probably everybody will have forgotten about all of that stuff in 20 years or so, or moved on to other ideas and other problems. But
Sure.
the people are the things that carry on with the real legacy.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I think in my career, the superintendents or turf managers that have that same mindset are some of the best in the industry, where they're I when I came out of college, I was hired by a superintendent who said, "I'm hiring my replacement every time I'm looking for an assistant." And
Hmm.
with that mindset, um, you're trying to convey or pass along all of the knowledge that you've got, and it's a little selfless, but it's also, maybe for some, it's a little threatening, to think of it
Hmm.
that way. But man, I'll tell you, I've had the same calls or the same texts, "Hey, I just got a new gig," or "Thanks so much for." I had one who's now in academia, texted me and said, "Thanks for not firing me when you should have." And he said, "I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for you not firing me." And sometimes you have to kind of pick through some of the stuff that drives you nuts, and realize, hey, this guy's going to be all right. He's just got to screw
Yeah.
his head on right. But
Yeah.
um,
Fortunately, I was a big enough screw up when I was a young person that I've had compassion for most of those people that have come into
yeah,
my circle, because it's like, okay, I could have been, you know, I could have been doing, 30 to life in a prison somewhere based on some of the foolishness I got into as a young man. And so, yeah, I definitely am a person of second chances.
yeah,
I don't freak out the first time something goes wrong. Now, if it goes wrong 10 times in a row, then I have to make a hard decision. But
maybe time for a
yeah,
correction at that point, right?
yeah, I let young people make mistakes because that's just part of being a young person.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Okay, so we've talked about recruiting. We've talked about building other pipelines. Um, what do you think your best advice is to students who are getting ready to graduate? They're not going to go on to graduate school. They want to get into the career, or into the turf management side of the career. What I had a pretty, I wouldn't call it rigid, but a structured program for interns, especially. And for me, it was a sit down interview. Tell me what tell me what you're weakest in, so we can make that strong. But how do you, I mean, is it a similar instruction when you're sending students out for either for internships or first jobs? What do they need to know? What do they need to be armed with and prepared for to be
Mhm.
successful?
Well, that's a really big question that there's a lot of potential answers. But I think I think you really hit on something there. Is that I try to encourage students to say, okay, assess where you are right now.
Yeah,
What kind of experience do you have? What are you weak in? What are you strong in? And try to find internships or first jobs that can help build those
right,
areas of
right,
weakness. I think that's still a key in anything. A lot of kids will come into a university, and they're, that maybe they're passionate about golf and they've been golfing their whole life. And they start seeing the bright lights of Pebble Beach or Augusta National, and they think, oh, that's where I'm going. That's where I want to go. And truthfully, they don't have enough experience to go do that and really gain something. But not that those places aren't good; they are good.
right.
But you probably need to go into a place like that after you've got a little seasoning
Yeah,
and you're ready. So we try to, help students think about their progression. It's like, well, maybe after your freshman year, you just need to go work for the local country club,
Hmm.
and learn how to mow greens and rake bunkers and do some of the real basic skills. And then the next year you could do an internship at a higher end club that you're going to get to do, maybe, be involved with spraying or things like that. And then finally, maybe you want to go to to a place that's hosting a major golf tournament or something like that, for another internship. So we want them to build. We don't want them to think that they've got to start at the top, right away. And I think the same applies to, going out into, a first job. Is that, um, going into a culture where you're going to learn and you're going to get responsibility and
Yeah.
you're going to grow and learn more. Again, that can happen in a lot of different kinds of golf courses. It doesn't have to be a top 100. And so, it's really important for students to, kind of think through that. I mean, if they want to be at a top 100 golf course one day as a superintendent, then obviously they're going to have to get into that world, pretty
Yeah.
early when they
Yeah.
get out there. But it still doesn't mean they can't gain a lot of value by being at a good, top 10 course in Arkansas for a couple of years and really learning and getting a lot of responsibility and really
Right.
learning the management side of it. And then they can move on to those other types of positions.
I think real honest self-assessment for anybody can be a really difficult thing if you're being brutally
Hmm.
honest with yourself. And I've had some students that have come in and really laid it out. Hey, I don't know how to do X. I know I need to learn that. And I've had others that have said, no, I'm pretty good. And about day two, you realize you're not there yet. So then we have to have another sit down. But I think for superintendents listening or turf managers, head turf managers, I think that's an important thing for them to do as well, as identify in a teaching sort of mindset. Okay, what does this individual need to be successful? And if you're not, I don't know what the motivation would be to take on interns if you're not interested in seeing them grow and succeed. And I think
Yeah.
some are just to fill the ranks of employees, but I think that the best ones that I see even today are the ones that really want to want to see them grow and move on and succeed. If you get to keep one as an assistant down the line, great. If not, you've certainly made an impact still. And I think that's not easy for everybody to
Mhm.
look at it
Well,
that way.
and you're spot on, Kevin. It's just there are some superintendents and clubs out there that really have very structured internships, and they do that. They try to assess where students are and figure out what they really need to, grow at over a 3 month period while they're there working in the summer, and they give them those responsibilities. And and recognize that, there's going to be some growing pains, but that's okay. That's what those positions should be for. And um, you know, if superintendents really want a pipeline of interns year after year, they have to develop a program like that, because
Right.
the best advertisement they got are former interns
Yeah.
that talk to people and
Yep.
and just say, hey man, that was a great experience and I learned a ton. And if they come back and say that, then other students want to go there.
Yeah, I remember my internship year had a couple that needed it, like you said, they needed that marquee name on their resume, and not to fault them for pursuing that path, but it was interesting to come back to school in the fall and listen to their experience and how limited it was.
Hmm.
And I wanted to go west, and I went out to Colorado and absolutely was drinking from a fire hose for the entire summer, and couldn't have been more thankful for the opportunity I had. And it was just dumb luck in some ways, but it's unfortunate when they get focused on one thing and it doesn't pan out that way, and how sour they can get. So you're right. It
Hmm.
is great advertising. And I'm sure unofficially you're vetting those superintendent programs, those intern programs, to see where you do and don't want to send them in the future, just because it's,
Hmm.
that's part of your legacy and your responsibility to those students is to get them making the right choices and the right steps, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of kids want to go somewhere, and I can always say it's like, there's a golf course 10 minutes from this campus that will absolutely change your life.
Right.
If you go spend a summer there. And so, it's not always about going somewhere across the country or going to, a top 100 or, a major championship golf course or whatever. I mean, there's a lot to be said about a good, even local internship where the superintendent, heck, a lot of times there's superintendents that came out of my program and they know
Right.
if they don't take good care of the interns I send them,
Yeah.
I won't send them anymore.
Exactly.
So they go out of their way to help them.
Kind of the mafia mentality, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit back to research then. We beat the internship and the student horse to death. What are you working on these days? What's the current research? What do you see in the future? I mean, you've been plugged in with GCSA on technology. We're going to get to that here in a minute, but what's keeping you busy on the research side of your job?
Well, I'll have to admit, Kevin, I'm not as aggressive with my research program as I was 10 years ago. I think
Okay.
it's just getting closer to the end that I'm wanting to see the things that I'm currently working on kind of get wrapped up and not leave a lot of stuff hanging. So I haven't been pursuing as many new research areas in the last couple of years as that I did, 10 years ago. But we still have some pretty exciting things going on. We were kind of early. We're not I wouldn't say adopters, but we got access to, very early to GS3. And
Okay.
we've got some studies going on currently with that I'm pretty excited about, just to see what the potential of that new technology is, and how it can best be used by superintendents to get meaningful information. So I'm working on that. I'm still
So
doing some work on. Go ahead.
pause on that for a minute. So give me
Okay.
a 60-second synopsis. I've kept this whole technology at an arm's length until I kind of get a little bit of feedback from the field. What's your take from a research side? What value
Well,
wise?
I don't know that I have a strong take yet, Kevin. I mean,
Okay.
we're really just we got the technology at the end of last year.
Okay.
So we're just now really starting to collect data with it. I think I definitely got a lot of potential. I mean, the initial data looking at how it assesses ball roll distance or, green speed, and how it assesses firmness look to be very highly correlated to other technologies that we use currently. I think the big mystery still is kind of the smoothness and trueness measurements that you get
Okay.
from it, and so that's going to be one of the things we're going to be trying to tease out over the next year or two is how do those numbers relate to other things that we've used in the
Yeah.
past to measure that. Now, if it turns out that it is highly correlated to some of those other measurements, then I think you start talking about a one device approach to getting access to a lot of different kinds of metrics related to putting green quality. So I'm pretty optimistic about it, but I'd still say we don't know enough yet to make
Okay.
a strong case for it.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to learn a lot here in the next year or two.
Okay. So I interrupted you. What else is current and exciting?
I've got some work that we're just starting this year that I'm kind of excited about. It's related to the shade work we've done, and it's also related to the winter kill cold tolerance work we've been doing on warm season grasses for a number of years. Back since I first came to Arkansas. But one of the things we were writing a research review article here this last year about preventing winter kill or managing winter kill on warm season grasses. And, I was asked to write about the effects of shade on winter kill because we see it in the field all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
areas that are getting some shade are much more prone to winter injury. And so when I started digging into the literature to see what we really knew about it, what I found out was that we actually didn't know anything about it.
Mm.
There was really no data out there that talked about what level of light stress would actually weaken a grass enough to predispose it to winter kill. And so we're basically doing work now where we're looking at lower shade levels, not shade levels that cause the grass to die in the middle of the season, but shade levels that allow the grass to still look relatively healthy, but still will eventually potentially lead to winter kill. And so that's kind of what we're approaching this right now. And again, we're just getting started on it, but basically looking at shade level during the growing season, lower shade levels, and then seeing how that affects winter survival. So
Interesting.
I'm kind of excited about that because, like I said, I think there's in many cases, I've gone out to golf courses and looked at winter kill, and you could see areas that were, there was no question that they were a shade line or a shade pattern from a tree.
Right.
And the superintendent would say, "Well, the grass looked great all summer, but it didn't survive the winter because of that amount of shade." So
Right.
that's kind of what we're ultimately trying to get at. Is there a level of shade that may not cause the grass to really suffer during the summer, but it could potentially lead to winter kill?
I wonder if that's more soil temperature related, just even a few degrees, or if it's more energy storage. That'll be interesting to see
No.
what it'd be interesting to see what you come up with.
Like I said, there's no data, so we're kind of
Yeah.
starting with a clean slate and saying, okay, we've got to start somewhere.
We'll get some
Let's do
data,
some of
Doc.
this.
Let's get this done,
Yeah.
huh? Now, was it this winter or last winter that was pretty tough in your area for winter kill?
Last year was definitely worse than this year. There's been
Okay.
some winter injury this spring, but
Yeah.
definitely not as bad as it was last year.
Yeah.
We had lots of winter kill from Oklahoma over here into Northwest Arkansas, especially not just on Bermuda grass, but on zoysia grass as well, which
Okay.
is, you know,
Is it?
according to the textbooks, the zoysia grass is supposed to be able to survive the winter.
Yeah. Yeah. So for a guy that's been in the north too long and hasn't had an opportunity to lose any warm season grass, I've lost plenty of cool season. Is it more low temperature related, or is it moisture related, or a little bit of both?
In terms of what usually causes winter
Yeah.
kill,
Yeah.
it's really both.
Okay.
And in some of our work, and you guys never asked me to talk about warm season grass winter kill when I come out
Right.
to the Pacific Northwest, but we've been working on this for a long time, and what we found is that low temperature certainly is a part of it. If we get temperatures around here that are single digits or sub-zero, warm season grasses are potentially gonna be injured. Probably one of the things that has surprised me the most in that research and has, I think, been probably one of the more helpful things that we've been able to point out for the industry is that soil desiccation and even soil hydrophobicity in the winter is also a real problem. And the use of wetting agents, trying to irrigate in the winter if at all possible, maintaining moisture status is really important. And that was something that kind of came out of that work that we weren't necessarily expecting, but once we started seeing that okay, this is not just low temperature, it's actually desiccation.
Yeah.
We were able to tease that out and show that desiccation is a big problem.
Interesting. Well, it kind of makes sense. I know a lot of guys in the Mountain West deal with that and have irrigation systems that can help them in that regard, because that's the number one killer in those areas is just desiccation. You get an open winter and it can be tough on them for sure. Very
Well, and
interesting.
one of the things that I think it was the reason it was not well understood is because we're talking about warm season grasses that are completely dormant all winter.
Right.
So you can't tell that they're under drought stress. I mean, they're just dormant. And so they could be under severe drought stress, and it doesn't look any different than if they were, in saturated soil. It's just brown grass.
So is the solution then to build just like you would in the summer months, build a a, a model with your TDR or your POGO monitoring to just say, okay, if it gets below this threshold, we've got to, if it hasn't rained, we have to make provisions for it.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people that, basically the best approach is that whatever their minimum number is in the summer, that's got to be their
Okay.
minimum number in the winter. And if
Yeah.
it gets down into that area, that they need to be thinking about, trying to get some water on it. And like I said, surfactants have helped a lot because I think, surfactants will pretty much last all winter if you put them out late in the fall
Sure.
or right before winter.
Sure.
And so they'll just help keep that, especially on like sand greens and or sand cap fairways,
Yeah.
just help keep those hydrated a little bit better in the winter time and not become hydrophobic.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Okay, I'm looking at the clock, so we've got just enough time to do these two, and then I don't know if you've ever listened to my podcast, but I always do a lightning round at the end, and it's not designed to catch you off guard or anything, but it's just kind of a fun little wrap up. So the two questions I have left, where do you see the greatest opportunities for turf management in the future? And that could be a number of things. That could be, I see a lot of opportunities in sports turf management, or that could be, somebody in research. What maybe that's too broad a question, but
And
I asked
that's
it.
a pretty broad question, and I'll answer it by saying that I think there's opportunities in all sectors.
Yeah.
I mean, right now there's that old saying, there's always room at the top.
Hmm.
And, good people, if they're passionate about what they do, whether it's golf or sports fields or lawn care or whatever, there are opportunities and they can be very, very successful. It's always golf and sports turf is always the kind of the big sex part of turf grass management. But probably, and not probably, definitely the most successful students that have ever come to the University of Arkansas. They've gone out and started their own lawn care business, lawn applicator business,
Right.
gotten into, building hardscapes and landscapes and installing irrigations. And, one kid that went through our program probably 20 years ago, 25 years ago now, maybe, he just sold his business for, I don't know how many zeros were after it, but he said he was retired.
Wow.
at 45 years old. So it's
Yeah.
like, well, okay, he got in the right line of work.
Well,
So,
and I think in the broader world, there's truth to that as well. I mean, I've got a son that's our youngest is getting ready to graduate high school, and he wants to travel after he's done with school, which I think is great. This is a great time to do that. Go see the world, learn something about yourself, learn something about the country, but then find something that there's a need for, instead of just following the path that everybody else follows. And hopefully through this experience, he'll see, you know what, I need to learn how to work on my car because I broke down on the side of the road in New Mexico and I was screwed, whatever it might be. My wife doesn't share my opinion on this, but I think it's going to be a great experience for him. So conversely then, what are going to be the biggest challenges? And it's not just that pipeline of employees. I think there's a lot of things facing turf managers that maybe we're not thinking about.
well, I think I think the golf industry especially has done a great job of really promoting the sustainability of golf, the
Mm,
environmental impact of golf, and I think all turf has that opportunity to talk about the great things that turf brings to the party rather than just letting the loudmouths on the other side of the fence talk about some of the negative things. And there are
right.
some negative things out there that we need to overcome. But I think that's going to continue to be the challenge, is just as we become more highly urbanized and populated in areas without limited water. I mean, we've got to be able to to figure out and show how turf can continue to be impactful in our community while not being, wasteful or,
Yeah.
having some kind of negative environmental impact. And so, um, I heard somebody describe, um, I said something about to somebody one day about an environmental activist, and and they said, "Well, golf course superintendent is an active environmentalist." And I thought,
Oh,
that's a pretty good way to describe
I
it.
like
That's what
that.
they should be. An
Yeah.
active environmentalist.
Agreed.
You're constantly passionate about the environment you're working in, whether that's wildlife or water quality or natural habitat or whatever. I mean, there's just so many ways for the turf industry to recognize and embrace environmentalism in a really, really positive way. And so we encourage our students to take courses in environmental science and
Yeah.
take courses in botany and things that just even entomology or courses that let them learn about the other organisms and things that they're going to interact with as they get out in the real world.
Yeah. And then I think the other important thing is conveying that passion to the general public and and
Hmm.
a wider audience. I think we're all pretty passionate about it, but we tend to kind of keep it to ourselves and not really toot our own horns. And I think, there's so many great stories to be told about the industry that aren't being told because superintendents like to be behind the scenes a little bit more than maybe other departments or other areas of the industry for sure. Um,
Hmm.
you were talking about working with the USGA's new technology. Can we get too data driven, do you think? Have we lost some of
Um,
that feel because we're so data driven?
yeah, it's a good question, Kevin. I don't know that I have an answer. I think
Or is
um,
it more of a generational shift that old guys like us just need to get over, and technology and data is so important to a younger generation of turf managers that it's us that's not adapting
well,
fast enough.
I'll answer it this way. One of the things I see with college students now, which it's shocking to me,
Mm,
a person of my age, is that we'll be working on, let's say, turfgrass math problems, and I might give them put a simple problem on the board, and it's multiply 4 times 10, and people start pulling their phone out to use the calculator, and it's
right.
like, you don't know how to just multiply 4 times 10 in your head.
What's a
And so I
time-stable,
think,
Doc?
yeah, it's like the things that were just drilled into us when we were young
Right.
students that are still just second nature to us. Simple math, simple, common sense things that we learned as a child. That's where I think technology gets in the way. Is that as
Mm,
long as the technology can answer the question, they're fine.
I don't need
But
to
when they
know it.
reach that point where the technology can answer the question, then it becomes more difficult for them.
Yeah.
So my feeling is that there always needs to be some, you need to have a good foundational understanding of science and mathematics and you know um, internal combustion engines or whatever the case may be, just to be able to deal with the day-to-day problems that you have to solve. And but technology can be very valuable and very, can save a lot of time and be very efficient if you know how to use it properly.
Yeah. It can save a
But
lot
you
of
don't
time,
want
but
you don't want to lean on it. You don't want to lean on it so hard that you don't
yeah,
know how to do
it
some
can save
basic things.
it could save time, and I think it could also eat a lot of time depending on how you utilize it. I mean, for me, I saw right away the value of moisture meters because
Hmm.
I was almost like my grandma checking the cake, with the toothpick. I would just take my Swiss Army knife and stick it in, and I could tell resistance. I could tell how dry the knife blade was when it came out of the ground. But how in the world do you convey that to an assistant or an intern? That's a
Hmm.
feel thing that's really, but guess what? You stick your knife in, you feel it, you assess, and then you see that equates to 14% volumetric
Hmm.
water content. Okay, it's 14. That's what I want. And so for me, that really leveled the playing field of my field to their embracing of technology. And it was just, it just opened up so many avenues and so many opportunities to kind of convey that feel in a different way that was maybe more relatable.
Yeah, and one of the things about data that I see, and of course, there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to address that by developing platforms to pull data into,
I know where you're
which I
going with
think
this.
which is going to be absolutely necessary because it's no different than in research. I mean, sometimes we collect too much data.
Right.
And then it becomes, okay, how do I digest this mountain, these billions of numbers into something that I can understand and is meaningful? And I think it's the same thing with a golf course superintendent. I mean, if you're going to get into being a data, person that you're going to use data for all your decision making, well, you're going to have to have a process in place that data gets brought into a system, it gets sorted, it gets organized, it gets put into where you can actually make a decision, because you can quickly, just get buried in, billions and billions of data points that if you can't really see what they mean, well, then
and they're
they
not
were a waste
connected
of time.
and they're not connected and collated with each other to be able to make real-time decisions. I couldn't agree with you more. That's been my criticism. I mean, all these companies are running their own individual races because they're worried about their product being developed, and yet the end user's got 10 different dashboards of data that don't ever collate into one single snapshot of what's going on. And I think the company that's able to kind of consolidate some of that is going to be the winner in the end. And I don't know who that. Yeah, I don't know who does that, but they're going to be the winner in my opinion. Okay, so we're going to go to lightning round and then we'll wrap up and you can go on with your day. I don't know what you got planned today, but it's halfway over in Central Time. So first thing pops into your head here, college or pro sports?
Pro.
Really? Okay. All right. What sport in particular?
I'm an NFL guy.
Okay. Cool. Your team?
I hate to say it, but the Dallas Cowboys.
It could have gone a lot of different directions. So that's interesting.
We had a great run when I was younger, but it's been a long time.
It's been a bit of a dry spell. Exactly. Yeah. My whole family's Vikings fans, so I feel your pain. I mean, it's there's
that's been an even longer run.
At least there's a couple of rings to show for it in your case. I know you travel quite a bit for work. What's the coolest place you've ever visited?
Oh boy.
I love
coolest place I've ever been.
These answers from academics is always interesting because you guys just get to see some of the neatest places.
I'll have to say South Africa.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I could have said 10 other places too, but South Africa was pretty darn cool.
Cool. I've never had that answered, so that's good.
Yeah.
I know we've drank both. So beer or wine?
Well, I'll have to say both, but as I've gotten older, I drink more wine and less beer. So I definitely more wine these days than beer.
Fair enough. Okay, so I'm going to make you pick your favorite kid here. Cool or warm season grasses?
No, it's got to be warm season grasses. Yeah.
Because you're in Arkansas or just in general?
Man, if you want to put Bermuda grass up against any cool season grass in the world and put them under the worst possible conditions and see who's going to survive, I can tell you Bermuda grass is the champ.
Yeah, I would agree
remains
with that.
Undefeated.
So, will you or are you using AI?
I do use AI.
Okay.
I probably am teaching more about AI than I'm using it myself. I think it's got a lot of potential.
Yeah.
And I know that you were at a conference. I think I spoke about it a little bit here this last year. And so, again, it's not something that needs to be the sole source of your knowledge, but it can certainly be something that can improve efficiency and improve how you communicate things with people if you use it properly. So um, it's both Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader in the same
Man,
spaceship.
that's an interesting way of looking at it, but I think you're right. I think it depends on who it is and how they're going to utilize it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the last question, you knew I was going to have to ask something about this, but do you think Calipari is going to fit into the Arkansas program?
Well,
that's
a great question.
And the Gonzaga, Kentucky thing that we had going, the home and home, I wonder if that's going to change now to the Razorbacks and
well, that'd be
Bulldogs.
great.
I
Yeah,
would
we'll
love
have
it.
to we'll have to each make a road trip if that happens.
That's right. I'd love
So I think he's going to fit well here. I mean, I think at Kentucky he had just been there too long and
Yeah.
probably had just kind of lost the boosters and maybe lost the locker room a little bit. But man, he's a great coach. I mean, he's
Yeah.
been a great coach everywhere he's been. So I think and Arkansas has embraced him. I mean, it was like having Elvis move to town.
Oh, good.
When he came here. So I think everybody's pretty excited and pumped up about him being here. And I hope he can be successful and have one more big run with a college program and maybe even win at the national championship.
So at the very least, it's going to rekindle our wager every year for the NCAA tournament, and maybe you'll get over your issues with the portal and the NIL and watch again next year.
Maybe I will. It's
in fact, I've got a good looking Arkansas hat right here that I keep.
Oh, look at you.
But yeah, that's what I've got, Mike. I really appreciate you coming on. Those were good answers, and I think the conversation went exactly the way I wanted it to. Your perspective on the industry and students and talent coming out, I think is really important. In the West, there's so few programs left. Oregon State's about the last of the land grant universities. In fact, I think it is in the Western U.S. So it's important for us, I think, to support programs like yours and not only on the research side, but sending you prospects and sending you students and thank you for everything you're doing and continuing to do. And thanks for coming on today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Kevin. And I think the audience probably has figured out by now that we probably could have sat here for 10 hours.
Yes.
And continue to talk about things. And it's always a pleasure to visit with you. And I always happy when I get to come out to the Pacific Northwest and speak, mainly because I'm going to get to see you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, Mike. That's very kind of you, and looking forward to seeing you again soon. But thanks for coming on, and thanks everybody for listening. This has been another great conversation with a good friend, and we'll talk to all of you soon.